Great. So thank you everyone for joining the next episode of the AI Adoption Playbook. I'm here with Dan Williamson from Ryan. Dan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So Dan Williamson, Director of Artificial Intelligence at Ryan Companies. Ryan Companies is a national real estate development and construction design company. So we work on every aspect of the building life cycle, and I lead up our AI strategic efforts and where we are going as far as adopting and implementing AI.
Really, really cool. And can you tell me a little bit about, what your role is at Ryan? What have you been working on there?
Yeah, sure. So we kind of took on a larger enterprise data strategy about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. We started to work on our enterprise data strategy, which is really an AI readiness strategy, which involved putting some leadership around what our direction will be related to AI. And so I kind of jumped into that seat. Been leading that for about 18 months now. And my role really is about shepherding our direction and implementation of AI tools, AI strategy, and honestly educating and communicating with the company about, the guardrails, the policy, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and where we're going. And so that involves building out a team, that involves communicating and meeting with business leaders about what use cases should we be going after, and then, staying very close or as close as possible to where the technology is headed, not necessarily just in real estate and construction, but also just the AI industry in general and how that will apply to what we're doing. And so I actually come from a background being a building architect, and I've been in the technology space for a while now, and I have to clarify building architect when I'm in the technology space, because I do kind of joke with technology, like data architects and stuff, that I'm a real architect. So
I absolutely love that. And it's funny how in the software industry, people can kind of forget that the word architect actually means something, outside of our little bubble. So that's actually really cool. I mean, obviously 18 months is, in normal terms, kind of the blink of an eye, but in AI terms, like essentially the entire age of the AI era so far. What did you sort of expect coming into that leadership role for Ryan of what AI would mean for the construction industry at large and for you guys specifically? And how much of that played out correctly? What were you surprised by? What's the, how has the industry evolved versus your expectations 18 months ago?
That's a good question. I would say some of the things that I've seen happen from our strategy, one of the things I knew we were going to have to do is educate people. I consume a lot of AI content. It's my job. And so I stay close to what's happening and what the latest developments are and how, thinking about how that applies to our business. But most of, our company doesn't think about that every day like I do. And so I knew I knew the transformational impact this technology is going to have on our industry and for Ryan specifically. And so a lot of, the strategy initially was around building up our people and our culture around the importance of AI and how it's going to affect our, the growth and trajectory of our company. And so we spent a lot of time talking to leaders, educating them on the technology, what it means, how to think about it.
Yep.
And I think something that I didn't expect was, and maybe just because I'm involved in this discourse regularly, I expected more people to be aware of it, just with how fast ChatGPT kind of blew the lid on AI and, it was kind of became mainstream. I think I expected more people to be aware of the technology. And I think I kind of found this hurdle of, it was this technology that wasn't for me. Someone else is going to figure it out for us and I won't have to engage with it. And, I think we've made a lot of good progress on people becoming engaged, thinking about it, and not just using the technology, but starting to think strategically about it. Because ultimately, I'm leading up the strategic direction for AI, but a superintendent on a job site doesn't care what I think unless they're invested in what it means for them. And so partnering with subject matter experts has been a big part of our strategy as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot about how quickly that rollout and that expansion has gone. I started my career in 2010 at Google. And at the time, the mobile industry was sort of just big emerging wave, maybe mobile and social. Obviously the iPhone 2007 and then Facebook. I can't remember exactly when Facebook was released, but those were the big things. And it really took almost 10 years for those technologies to become truly penetrated across the entire landscape of, people in the US, let's say. And if you look at something like ChatGPT or AI, I think it was the fastest to 100 million users of any application in history. And one of the things that's like most striking about it is it's not just penetrated the consumer market really quickly. It's like really traditional enterprises, investment banks, all the way through to, construction companies are really leaning into this, like, almost as soon as the technology is available. Right. And that is so, so different to almost every other technology rollout that I've seen at least in my career so far. I'm curious if you have a take on why that's happened so quickly. Like, what is it about AI that makes it like the kind of thing that Ryan would invest in almost from day one of the technology existing, as opposed to sort of any of these other technology waves that have taken much longer to get to, the enterprise?
My take on that is that because of the personal level of, I would say, value an individual found for their personal needs, whether it was planning a trip or making a recipe, like a consumer engagement was so rapid and the value was so good that people saw right away that they could just want that at work, right? They just wanted to do that at work. And I think there was this almost groundswell in a lot of companies of the individuals bringing it and seeing value, that they just wanted, wanted to use those tools. Not necessarily that executives were the ones that found that value right away and pushed it down. Right. And I think what we've found is once it's kind of clicked for our leaders, like the support and the velocity we can move at is much greater. Right. But yeah, I think a lot of the adoption or the progress has come from this kind of groundswell of individuals that found personal value in the consumer version of these products and said, I want to do this at work, because they found so much value in what it gave to them. So that's kind of what I think. The slowness, I would say, in adoption, though, on the enterprise side, I mean, we are adopting it faster than I think a lot of technology we have in the past. But I think our velocity is limited by our ability to make sure we're doing it in a safe and secure way, right? And I think that just inevitably takes time. And also changing people and process is harder to change than necessarily what the technology can already do.
Yeah, totally agree. So tell me a little bit about that, like discovery moment for you personally then. Like, what was your first experience, interaction with the technology? How did it sort of strike you? At what point did you realize, like, oh, whoa, like this is a big deal?
I was interested in the application of AI before, large language models were really a part of it. I came from a background, I was at HDR before coming to Ryan Companies, which is a global architecture and engineering company. And I was working in a team that we called ourselves a data-driven design team. And we were, about leveraging data in the design process in a more mature way than most of our competitors at the time. And that was, we saw the value in which traditional AI, traditional machine learning was going to be a part of something we were interested in, kind of traditional data science. And so we saw an application there. And then it was, coming to Ryan, I saw a larger, I would say, life cycle of data possibilities. And that's what was really interesting to me about Ryan was, more data access to leverage these ideas with. Yeah. And then ChatGPT, and honestly, like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion came around. And since I was a building architect, the image side of stuff is really what caught me first is, wow, these images are really interesting. I didn't see an immediate, like in the process, I knew my gut told me there was value in some of that stuff for sure. But I think it was just really interesting and cool. And then that on top of, I would say the moment that some of that clicked for me, not long after ChatGPT came out, was just this computer understands language so well. And that ultimately will change the user experience for people. And that's what's really guided a lot of the work I've been a part of.
Yeah, 100%. That's so true. I think it's like absolutely nuts how, when you get that thing, when you have that experience that makes sense in your life in the context of what you do, you can sort of interpret and you can sort of map to the ways in which it is likely to transform your life, even if you can't see the specifics of exactly what it's going to be, like what are the exact use cases going to be. You have this very visceral sense of like, okay, like this is the future, right? I remember that for me. Yeah. I remember having this very distinct thought where I was like, oh, this is exactly like the first time I used the internet. I had no idea like how the world was going to be different exactly, but I knew it was. And that's exactly what AI was for me as well.
Awesome. I I think in my mind, I actually don't have that long of a career in the building industry. An architect is an older person's career, generally speaking, because they have to gain all this experience, which I
Right,
think is
right.
unfortunate to an extent that you have to wait so long until you have experience to be really good at what you're doing.
Right.
But I just saw the complexity of buildings just grow and grow and grow. And I thought there's no way that a traditional architecture function could handle that complexity the way they used to. Look at buildings from the 1930s or 40s. You had radiator heating. You maybe didn't have forced air moving through a building. You sure as hell didn't have cameras and audio equipment and microphones and speakers and controlled VAV boxes, moving air in and out of buildings, automated blinds, automated building systems. You didn't have all this technology. Then on top of that, you didn't have these sustainability requirements and all this other regulation and codes. And, just the complexity of buildings has grown so much that, I just, being close to data in my career, I just knew that there was a need to wrangle that complexity. And I didn't think more people was going to be the way in which we could really wrangle that complexity well, that a computer could really understand that complexity if the data and algorithms are integrated really well.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. So let's talk a little bit about that, right? How do you actually take this new technology and apply it at a company like Ryan? Tell me a little bit about, how that works in practice. So how did Ryan end up with an AI strategy? Who were the right people to work on that? What was the process for kicking off this initiative and realizing internally this was something we needed to care about?
Yeah, so our CTO was a big driver of knowing this. He came from Best Buy, and so he came from an industry in e-commerce that was e-commerce and actually just regular physical retail, and had seen transformation as far as technology and AI and data transform the retail industry, and knew that same type of transformation was coming and already starting to happen in ours. And so knowing that we needed a data strategy was important, and really driven from, I would say, myself, our VP of Insights, and our CTO were really the drivers of needing that work done.
Really cool.
And that it needed to be an AI readiness strategy. And so what did we need to do to mobilize to take advantage of this situation? But we are already starting to tinker with startups that are playing in the construction and real estate space, whether it's prop tech or construction tech. We are tinkering with companies trying to disrupt or provide value into our industry. We've worked with some partners in bringing robots onto our job sites to do better reality capture, and to try to use that reality capture to automate some progress tracking, or what we'd call schedule actualization on the job site. And so, we had been tinkering with individuals or startups that saw potential to disrupt or add value to the construction and real estate industry. And we are looking to, partner with those companies to help move the tech along. And so that's, I think, what started to, both the data strategy and some of that interesting tech that teams were starting to pilot, started to make the wheels turn for us and set us in motion to where we are now.
Cool. Okay. That makes tons of sense as a start point. And then how did you guys in practice set up your AI team? Did you have a special AI council? Was it comprised of different business leads, or was it specifically technologists, people with AI and data experience? Tell me about, your target team that worked on it, how you assembled it. How did you prioritize what you actually wanted to work on?
Yeah, I think a lot of the work came out of working with the consultant we used to help with our data strategy, and then putting in leadership role around AI specifically. And we reorganized our I would say our technology team to make a pure data team. So we have data team that has engineers, and both AI engineers and data engineers, and architecture. Yeah. That architecture is actual data architecture. And then also knowing that we are moving towards just modernizing our tech stack, modernizing onto a cloud infrastructure that would be able to take advantage of these services and capabilities. And so all that kind of mobilized ourselves down the route. And we very much met with the business to try and prioritize what they saw as value, what our actual subject matter experts saw the opportunities to be, and then took a hard look at what capabilities does AI actually have? What can it actually do? And overlay that with the use cases that we have, and say, okay, well, as we assemble a team and resources to build some of those capabilities, what skill sets do we need to be good at? And so we have some data engineering on our team. We have some specific AI engineering on our team. And we're continuing to grow our engineering capabilities.
Nice. One of the things I always find interesting about this approach is if your thesis is to figure out what can AI actually do, and then backtrack from there into how to build a team and how to choose what projects to prioritize, you can get stuck in this situation where by the time you figured out what AI can do, the set of things that AI can do has changed, right? It's moved forward.
Yep.
I mean, no technology has ever moved at the pace that AI is moving at, I think, in history. And it's tricky, right? So when you set the definition of like how Ryan defines, quote, what AI can do, what does that mean? Does that mean today? Does that mean 6 months from now? Does that mean like 3 years from now? How do you think about what that actually means in practice?
Yeah, good question for kind of clarifying what that means and how we look at it. And so we broke it down not into, maybe it's a different way of understanding the capabilities of AI. And it's looking at our business. And so, a lot of our business is unstructured data. That is just a massive amount of unstructured data. And so what we see AI now, with large language models and other modalities of language models or multimodal models, we see the ability to really harness unstructured data in a different way. And I think that changed our perspective. And so, we look at the fact that we are getting really good at using unstructured documents to our advantage. And that wasn't historically, the approach that we had. And so that when we say capabilities or what can AI actually do, like it can understand at scale lots of unstructured data and glean insights from those types of assets. And then we actually have a lot of those, and we can do something with them that we maybe historically didn't have. And so while yes, AI, like it gets the AI, models are just getting better and better at those capabilities, but that is a core capability that they have, and I think will sustain to have. And they will have other things that these models will be able to do and accomplish. And so it's not trying to be so predictive on what the models will fully be capable of doing, but understand something that my feeling is they will always be really good at, and can we start to leverage that to our advantage? And so same thing with computer vision type. The models are only going to get better at what computer vision is a capability. And being able to see, quote unquote, see. Right. And so how can we use that thinking of a computer can see? What can we do with that capability? And so trying to think about AI capabilities in that way.
Yeah, got it. That makes a ton of sense. Can you give me a little bit more color on what you mean by massive amounts of unstructured data and what it means for a company like Ryan to unlock that? Unstructured data can mean so many different things to different people, right? So for you guys, where do you see concretely the data assets that are valuable to you, and what are you excited about doing with them?
Yeah, so if you think about construction, we're a general contractor for the most part. The second word in that profession is contracting. And so we have a massive amount of contracts, right? Contracts are unstructured PDFs that have a lot of language in them. You might work on a job that may have 60 different contracts. And, we do 100 to 250 projects a year. That's a lot of unstructured data over the course of every year. And, construction contracts aren't the only type of contracts that we have. We manage real estate. Real estate has leases. We probably have hundreds of thousands of leases. And so that's a lot of unstructured data that we could do stuff with, whether it's glean better insights, whether it's generate that content more effectively in the future, or understand our risk profile with understanding that content faster. There's just a lot we could do. And so contracts is just one aspect of unstructured data. And then you think about all the communication that happens across the life cycle of a building. Building a building can take anywhere from 12 to 24 or 36 months. A lot of communication happens along that life cycle, and that's unstructured, communication that we could learn stuff of. What are the team dynamics? What's our safety risk? What's our client engagement look like? What is our sentiment of our team feel? So there's a lot of things that we can glean from that unstructured data. And then you look at, the last bit of unstructured data is just construction drawings. A construction drawing is unstructured data. It's not what I think a lot of people think of unstructured data, but it is a set of data that we could, produce higher quality documents. We could catch issues faster. There's just a lot of stuff in our business that is unstructured data.
100%. That makes so much sense. And then in terms of how you go about sort of weaponizing some of that unstructured data, you talk about some of the communications and being able to understand a little better what's really going on the ground. How, literally tactically, how do you go about doing that? Do you have data teams that are ingesting it into a centralized data lake? Are you building a custom AI infrastructure that's separate to your previous data infrastructure for this? How does it work practically?
Yeah, kind of like what you described there. And so our team is building out applications that both help, I'd say, on the capture side of data. So how do we capture data more efficiently and at a higher quality and make that a really good user experience for our end users? And then on this flip side of like, how do we consume data in a more efficient way? And a lot of that does mean putting it in a more modern cloud infrastructure, having it understood by having the tables have a lot of metadata associated with them. So when a large language model or an agent maybe wants to interact with that data, it knows what to do with it. And so our team is building both those data repositories, but also building the vehicles to put data into those repositories in a consistent way. And I think that is going to be the biggest upside that we have, is a lot of that data right now just lives in silos, doesn't live in an aggregate way, and isn't, I would say, commonly understood by a computer system. And so we're working to make, like I said, both on the capture end of the data, can we build applications or user experiences that capture data better than asking someone to just input data into a data form, because no one likes doing that. So can we capture the data more efficiently? And then can we consume the data more efficiently as well? We do build a lot of dashboards, but I think a lot of people have dashboard overload. And is there better ways that we can deliver data to our business? And, we're working on those experiences as well.
100%. That's actually really cool. And I guess I'm curious a little bit on that topic of figuring out how to like collect the data and then extract it and then sort of make it valuable. Do you guys have a framework for how to prioritize your energy here? Like, there's so much data, as you said, at Ryan. There is so many different projects that you could do that like AI no doubt would be useful for. How do you figure out where to start and like what to actually get going on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of people struggle with where do I start? And through our business, meeting with leaders and trying to understand the landscape. And I wouldn't advise people to maybe over labor those conversations, but do have them, because you need them to be ambassadors. And the biggest thing that we learned from some of those engagements was finding the right partners in the business that want to go on this journey with us. And so you kind of need your evangelists in the business that are willing to partner and help build those visions together of how AI is going to change their department or their roles or their business processes. And so we prioritize a lot based on value that we intrinsically see, maybe leadership sees it, but where we have really good partners in the business that want to go on this journey with us. Especially as we're pretty early in our journey. I actually think most people are pretty early in their journey. AI is just, it's pretty young still as far as the way we talk about it now. And so I think that it is making sure that we have the evangelists to help get those wins and get off the ground, and not be so picky of trying to find the highest, best value to start with, but start with people that want to go on the journey with you. That's where we've really found a way to prioritize. And I think as more people see the value we provide, it'll be easier to convince maybe the harder people that are to convince at first.
Right. Yeah. That's really, really interesting. I love the idea of like finding the right business sponsors. Do you guys find that the best business sponsors tend to be execs? They tend to be individual contributors, mid-level managers? Like, what makes a great, like, other than enthusiasm, obviously, what makes for a really effective business sponsor?
Yeah. I think that you do really want to have alignment of, vertically from executive down to the individual contributor. Honestly, a lot of the contributors are where some of these really good ideas come from, but ultimately you do need a sponsor that sees that vision as well and is willing to spend time embracing those ideas as well. Where we've found a lot of value, I'd say, is maybe a few steps right below an executive, of them being able to have the capacity to think through these ideas and test prototypes, evaluate software, think differently about the business process. And that takes time. AI isn't just a light switch that you turn on and magically all your business processes are solved. Like, it takes investment in people's time to think about these things and to change people's perception and train them. And that takes time. And I think, to me, you need that at a certain level of leadership, that they are willing to spend that time and think through these things. And so I also do think you need executives at the uppermost level to embrace that change and give people the permission to solve these problems and maybe direct some of the solutioning that happens. So I think you just need alignment across the company as best as possible. I think that if you only have it coming from a groundswell, there's going to be you're going to be limited at the velocity you can move.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Really, really interesting. Okay, cool. Somehow we're already running up on time, which is kind of crazy to me. So I have a couple of more fun questions at the end to get your creative juices flowing. So, what do you think will be true about the building industry or about Ryan specifically in 5 years that will feel dramatically different to, how it feels to work in construction today?
Yeah. So two things come to mind whenever a question like this, or I get to think in this way. I think one, it's true that there will be more robots on job sites in a various different capacity. I think that industry is moving relatively fast, and I think there's a macroeconomic need for more robots on job sites. That's not to say that we're replacing jobs. It's because we can't find enough people to do those jobs to begin with. And so I think that we will see more robots on job sites. And in order for those robots to do really well, we need better data to inform them what to do. And so I think that we will, we're working hard at trying to enable some of those use cases and ideas. And so that's one that I'm really excited about, and I do think will be true in 5 years if we will see more robots on job sites. Like I said, various types of robotics. And then I think the other thing that really excites me, and I hope is true, is that we've really changed the user experience of how people capture and consume data. I think that I mentioned it earlier. People hate data entry forms. I hope that we're away from people entering data that way, and that we can make it, as either passive or enjoyable as an experience to both capture data and consume it. And I think, NLP type solutions make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that's actually really cool. The robots on site, it feels very, very futuristic. I am curious, if you think that the distance between where we are today and that vision of the future, is that a difference of research problems or is it a difference of engineering problems?
Wow, good question. So I don't think it's much as a technology issue. I do think there's research and some engineering that definitely needs to happen for sure. So I don't want to discount that fact, but I think that will move faster than our ability to get people to adopt that technology.
Wow.
So I think we're going to be slower as an industry to adopt it just because, for all intents and purposes, a trade worker has been doing it for, the average age is in the 50s, I think. They've been doing it for 40 years, 40, 30 years, and they have a way of doing it, and they are generally harder to change and adopt new processes. And so, changing the adoption of our end users, I think, is going to be difficult, but we'll get there. And I also think the robots themselves do need to advance, right? Some of them need to advance, but we're working with Field AI, which is just
really cool.
Built some incredible technology to make the Boston Dynamics quadruped.
Yeah.
Walk through a job site without a given path. Like it just discovers the building and maps it out. And it's absolutely wild. It is really fun to see. And I think that type of development will get better and better. It still has issues of it sees water, and job sites are going to have rain. It's going to have water, and it won't walk on water because it doesn't know how deep it is. So there's kind of funny nuances that they're working on, and we'll get over that. So there is some engineering that needs to happen, but I think the bigger challenge is going to be teams adopting the technology and really embracing it.
Can it go upstairs?
Yeah.
It's really cool.
It's nuts. I think some of the adoption too is just changing. If we choose to put robots on a job site, we will, construct buildings differently.
Right.
We will have to think about what that means for schedules and for how we design them as well.
Right.
And so there is a lot of things, I think, what are just opportunities to change. Construction and real estate is a risky business. There's safety concerns all the time on job sites. And so I think the more that we can make job sites safer and be more, let's say, certain in the outcomes on our jobs, I think everyone wins in that case.
That's so awesome. Yeah. I'm curious if you think that, as the sort of, you sort of mentioned earlier that perhaps the biggest bottleneck for the rollout will be the adoption problem of this is a radically new technology. How do you get people to adopt it? I'm curious if you think there are things that leaders should be doing today, even before the technology is necessarily fully mature. Is there stuff that the leaders should be doing today to sort of prepare the groundwork to make that adoption journey easier when the field AI robots or whatever other types of robots are ready to actually start doing this?
Yeah. I mean, I've said this. I say it to a lot of people, at least peers in our industry. I think you need leadership in AI, and I think you need subject matter experts that know their jobs, invested in designing the change that's going to happen to their industry. Like I said earlier, a superintendent isn't going to take anything Dan Williamson says to them as a good idea, but if I partner with the right superintendents or field staff on our job sites, hopefully they can help co-create that change together, and then it's a better message kind of coming from them, and they get to really embrace that change as they're the ones that are going to get to see the value. And so I think leadership needs to help, I would say, encourage the velocity and the time for teams to explore that. So I think you need leadership, and I think you need to give people the capacity to try some ideas and fail. And that's tough in our industry because, again, everyone is too busy to begin with. And so it's going to take some investment. And I don't think everyone needs to think that investment just means money.
Right.
It generally means people's mental cycles thinking about these things.
Cool. Yeah, so true. Really, really wise. Thank you so much, Dan. This was really, really awesome chat. I have a very, very exciting vision for like robots on job sites like in the not too distant future. So I can't wait. It genuinely is really, really exciting. Thank you so much for coming on, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, cheers. Ciao.
Yep, see ya.